Olympia Weightlifting Coach Course, Weightlifting Theory Part 2, Breakdown of the Lifts. So the objectives of this module are to present the hook grip, grip width, setup, differences between the pull phases for the snatch and the clean, and the jerk phases. After observation of this presentation, you should then complete the review questions for this module. So the hook grip. The hook grip is the grip of choice for almost all elite level lifters, and it involves pinning your thumb against the bar with your index and middle fingers. It's used because it's more secure grip. Whilst it is also a weaker grip, at least when you first start using it, it actually makes your grip stronger once you acclimatise and kind of get used to it in the long run. However, having a secure grip is more important to reduce the rotational torque of an Olympic bar. And the way that we describe this is if you have like a normal pronated grip with their thumb just kind of goes onto the outside of the fingers, naturally the torque of the bar, and what that means is that there's a rotational force on the bar which is trying to force your grip open. Now when you do something like deadlifting, that's negated because we tend to adopt a split grip where one is pronated and one is supinated, and again that kind of creates this anti-torque motion. We can't do that, can't adopt a split grip with Olympic lifting, so we adopt this double pronated grip, but we get around the rotational torque aspect by adopting this hook grip. Now with time and practice, lifters will get used to this grip, and we can kind of increase this acclimatization by adopting this grip for things like deadlifts, rows, pull-ups, etc., and that'll make that acclimatization process much. So here we just kind of show you how this works. So it's going to be a pronated grip. You put the thumb around the bar and then you pin it down with those two fingers. The other fingers also grip hold of the bar. Here we show it the other way, just for ease of for you to kind of see it a little bit easier. But yeah, thumb goes around the bar and then we pin it down with those first two fingers, and then the other two fingers take hold of the bar. And like we said, this anti-torque grip is massively important. So it is much better to get used to this grip straight away as soon as you kind of learning the Olympic lifts, rather than suddenly trying to switch once we've done loads of practice and you've kind of acclimatized to a standard closed pronated grip. So the hook grip is used during the first pull, the transition, and second pull phases of the snatch and the clean. During the pull under phase, it can be released, and sometimes it isn't. So for the snatch, you may well keep hold of it throughout the duration of the lift, but it can be released during the pull under phases. So in particular, we tend to see it released during the kind of catch phase. The thumb is released, and a kind of standard pronated grip is utilized, particularly as the kind of bar rolls a little bit further onto the fingers. It can be quite hard, as we said initially, to get used to this hook grip. Some tearing of the skin around the thumb can occur. So some people will kind of put tape around the thumb to try to prevent that from happening. However, consistent use, careful management, and obviously gradual implementation of this grip will lead to greater gains in lifting ability in the long run. Grip width. So the snatch and the clean typically have different width selections in order to facilitate the lifts being executed. So the snatch width is wider than the clean, and generally due to two reasons. So the wider the grip, the less vertical distance the bar has to travel. So what we mean by that is if you do a snatch with a narrow grip versus a snatch with a wider grip, you don't have to lift the bar up as high with the wider grip. So biomechanically it kind of makes it easier. Secondly, it is easier to get into a deep squat position with a wider grip for the snatch as well. If you ever try performing a narrow grip overhead squat, for example, it requires a lot more mobility, and so kind of having a wider grip it will make that easier. Now the clean width is generally narrower and just outside the shoulder width, and pretty much what you would use for the rack position when you're doing a front squat, and this allows the elbows to be pushed forward and the bar then to sit on the deltoids for the catch position. There are a variety of different ways of kind of estimating the grip width for these different lifts. As a rough point of view, with the kind of snatch, we'd kind of estimate that by doing an overhead squat, but pretty much during for the power position with the snatch grip, roughly the bar is going to be kind of upper thighs or in the kind of the crease of the hip. For the clean, as you see, because of the narrower grip, the bar is going to be lower down as we get into this power position, and therefore the bar is usually kind of mid to upper thighs as it brushes on. So for the snatch grip, whilst there are numerous ways to measure the ideal grip width, generally there are two ways of finding an individual's most comfortable position. The first one is just to kind of do a squat with the bar overhead, so an overhead squat, and just to play around with the grip to see what the most comfortable and strongest position feels like. You don't want it too wide, because although that may be easier for the overhead squat, it does make it more difficult to lift with a really wide grip. So if the bar is quite close to your head when you do an overhead squat, you probably want to have it slightly narrower. By the same token, you don't want it too close, because when you do an overhead squat, you're going to feel it's quite difficult to perform. The second way is when you're in the power position, as we said, the kind of beginning of the second pull, then the bar, as we just mentioned, should be somewhere between the upper thigh and the crease of the hips or lower abdomen. So here we see this kind of shown visually. If you're performing the kind of overhead squat, as we said, there should be a bit of distance between the bar and the head. You don't want it to be too close. So we can perform the overhead squat and get an idea of what's a good grip in that position, the catch position effectively for the snatch. Or we can kind of do it to where we get into this power position, and as we said, the bar should be pretty much upper thigh or lower abdomen in the hip crease. If it's too far down the thighs, then chances are your grip is too narrow for the snatch. For the clean, well, like the snatch, there are different ways of measuring the grip width for the clean. However, individual differences in mobility will lead to the most comfortable position for a lifter. So again, we would normally look to kind of assess this with a catch position. So we'd adopt a front squat in the Olympic position with and we call it kind of Olympic position. You obviously can do front squats with the bar kind of with the arms crossed, etc., but that has no carryover for Olympic weightlifting. So we're going to do a front squat in the rack position with the hands just wider than the shoulders. So as you're holding the bar in this front squat position, you don't want the bar pinning your hands onto your shoulders. Your hands should always be, and the grip should always be outside of your shoulders at that point. How wide? Well, that's going to depend a little bit on shoulder and wrist mobility, and the ability to keep the elbows as high as possible, so to kind of prevent the bar wanting to move forward. Again, we can look at it in the power position to kind of check it more so. And again, for the beginning of the second pull, the bar should be somewhere between the mid thigh and upper thigh. So again, just as we did with the snatch, looking at the catch position. So for the front squat, you can see the hands there to the outside of the shoulders. Some have it real close, so literally just kind of touching the thumb just touching the kind of outside of the deltoids. For others, they prefer it much wider. Again, that's a little bit of individual preference. You can kind of play around with the front squat and see which grip suits you best. When we are in the power position, as we see with the image on the right hand side, then the bar should be roughly mid or. Now for the setup, we see the two lifts there, snatch at the top, clean on the bottom image. There are similarities with both, so the bar should be, we say, roughly over the kind of end of the shoelaces. Again, there's a little bit of variation with this, but pretty much you don't want the bar too close because it's a bit restrictive, but also you don't want it too far away, so approximately kind of over the end of the shoelaces towards the toes. That's pretty much where we'd want it. Arms should be extended at the elbows. The elbows are kind of rotated out, and that's going to help us when we start to go into the pull aspect. The hips should be higher than the knees, so we don't want to be sat down too much. Chest is up, so we don't want to see a rounded back position. And we may see that with beginners that have very poor mobility. They literally can't get into this a decent setup position. Hopefully working on the deadlift should help to prevent that. The core should be braced, as should the upper back and the kind of thoracic stabilizers. Shoulders, again, another key point, shoulders should be over the bar or in front of the bar. Feet should be flat, weight kind of on the midfoot, and you take slack off the bar. So you're almost going to try and lift it, and that's what helps to take the slack off the bar, just in kind of preparation to start pushing the floor away from you using the legs and the hips. And as we said, there should be a hook grip. So you can kind of go through that little checklist. All of those things should apply to both the snatch and the clean, and then we can kind of look at exactly the small biomechanical differences depending on the grip width. So for the snatch, as we said, so this lifter is using some straps, but for the snatch, you're going to have to sit down a little bit lower because the bar is effectively further away with this kind of wider grip. So there's going to be similarities between the clean and the snatch, but you are going to have to sit down a little bit more just to kind of reach this wider grip for the bar. So snatch phases, just reviewing what we kind of went through previously. The first pull, then you're going to pull the bar from the floor to just above the knee height or just above the kind of patella. And the way this happens is the knees are going to move backwards and as the legs extend. So we want to try to keep everything pretty much the same as we had for the setup. The main changes occurring are that the floor is in effect getting pushed away and the knees are going to move backwards to clear space so the bar can move towards you. During the transition phase, you're going to push the hips forward, pull the shoulders back in order to get the body closer to the bar. The bar is going to continue to move upwards during this phase. And then as we kind of move from the transition into the second pull, the bar is then going to brush the upper thigh, low abdomen or that hip crease. You're then going to extend the knees and hips explosively, come up onto the toes into plantar flexion, and you're going to shrug upwards using the kind of scapula and the upper trapezius. Once the bar is moving upwards then, for the pull under, we shift our feet laterally in order to get into a better catch position. We pull the body downwards actively, getting into this overhead squat position in preparation for the catch. So, and then for the catch, as we accept the load of the bar, you're going to push upwards against the bar to look to decelerate it. You're going to push downwards into the floor. You're going to catch the bar overhead. Elbows need to be locked in this catch position, and then you're going to look to decelerate the bar as quickly as possible as it starts to move towards the ground. Once we've kind of decelerated the bar, then for the recovery, we're going to push upwards to a standing position. Brief pause, and then the lift is completed. So looking at snapshots of the snatch. So for the first pull, we see the bar, as we said, being moved away from the floor. Everything else, kind of body position stays pretty much the same. The kind of hip to shoulder or the torso angle. Main thing that's kind of occurring is the bar is moving towards you. The knees are moving away by extension of the knee, and the bar kind of overcoming inertia and getting the bar moving. As we see the transition phases at the bottom then, the bar continues to move upwards. We push the hips forward, which causes the knees to move forward. We pull the shoulders back, trying to maintain the shoulders over the bar for as long as possible until the bar brushes in this upper thigh or kind of hip crease, low abdomen position. And then we initiate the second pull, and that's a great image that we see at the bottom right hand corner where we do this triple extension of the hip, extension of the knee. We come up onto the toes with plantar flexion, and we do a strong shrug upwards, elevating the scapula using the upper trapezius. As the bar is moving upwards then, we move into the pull under phase where we actively pull ourselves downwards under the bar. The elbows will flex. We adjust our catch position by shifting our feet laterally, and then the bar will kind of start to reach its peak, and we obviously have that short period of time to get into the correct catch position. So we really pull ourselves downwards, drop vertically as quickly as possible as we shift our feet to the side in preparation for the catch position, which is what we see in the top right hand corner. The bar will reach its peak, become weightless very briefly, and then start to move towards the ground. We then look to decelerate it. We're going to get into this kind of overhead squat position. The feet are flat and we're actively pushing upwards against the bar and actively pushing downwards into the floor. And then for the recovery, once that bar's been decelerated, we then push downwards into the floor, up through the bar as we extend at the knees and at the hips. Try to keep the hips as far forward as we can and push upwards to reach that standing position for the finish. Here we see this slowly being performed then. So got that good setup. For the first pull, we're slow, where we're pushing the ground away from you. We're extending the knees. We try, as we see with the kind of split image on the right hand side, trying to keep that shoulders over the bar for as long as possible. And so we're trying to maintain that shoulder to hip position. We then move into this transition phase, push the hips forward, knees come forward, shoulders pull back, bar brushes against the thighs, Then we do that jump and shrug, triple extension, come up onto the toes. Once that's been completed, then we actively pull ourselves under the bar, shift our feet laterally, quickly get into this overhead squat position. We lock the arms out, accept the loads of the bar, and then actively push downwards into the floor whilst extending the knees and extending the hips as we move into the kind of recovery phase and up into this standing position. So key differences with the snatch. So for the setup, it's a wider grip and the lifter will have to get lower down. Differences with the transition and second pull, so the bar's going to brush the thighs slightly further up. For the second pull and pull under, bar's going to have to reach a higher peak height to get into the overhead squat versus the front squat, which we'd use for the clean. And as a result, it's biomechanically more inefficient, and therefore you're going to be lifting less load than you would do for a clean. Catch position, bars caught in an overhead squat position. So those are the key differences in relation to the snatch in comparison with the clean. For the clean setup then, as we said, the grip is much narrower, therefore you don't have to get down quite so low. Still a hook grip, hands are going to be at an appropriate distance, so you'll be able to get into the catch position without really having to shift them at all. But everything else is pretty much as we described it previously. So clean phases, obviously a lot of similarities to what we've just discussed. The first pull, you're going to pull the bar from the floor to just above knee height. Again, knees are going to move backwards as the legs extend. For the transition, again, we push the hips forward, pull the shoulders back, try to keep the shoulders over the bar for as long as possible in order to get the bar closer to the body. And again, the bar is going to continue to move upwards during that transition phase. And then for the second pull, the bar is going to brush the mid to upper thighs. You're going to extend the knees, hips explosively, come up onto the toes and shrug violently upwards. As the bar is moving upwards then, for the pull under, the elbows are going to bend. You can shift the feet laterally to adjust the catch position, and you're going to actively pull ourselves downwards into the front squat. During the pull under then and into the catch, we're going to bring the elbows under the bar and push upwards as the bar starts to kind of land in the rack position. And then again, you're going to look to decelerate that bar. For the recovery, again, we're just going to push upwards to get into our standing front squat position. So looking at the stills for the clean, again, you see a more upright position in comparison with the snatch. We're going to push the floor away, try to draw the bar towards us slightly. The knees are going to move backwards. Once the bar goes past the knees then, as we move into the transition phase, knees are going to get pushed forward as we push the hips forward. The shoulder's going to pull back. The bar is going to brush mid to upper thigh. And then as we see for the second pull, we initiate that violent jump and shrug. And then this kind of final image, you start to kind of start to pull ourselves downwards. So with the pull under, the elbows are going to be allowed to bend only once we've finished the full triple extension of the lower body and the elevation through the scapula. We pull ourselves downwards as the bar moves in an upwards direction. Hips drop downwards. We shift our feet laterally to adjust that catch position. And as we see with that pull under, the elbows then move under the bar and in front of the bar. And then we push upwards as we accept the load on the shoulders and as we get into the catch position in order to decelerate it. You want to try to get your elbows up as high as possible to stop the bar from wanting to kind of fall forwards. We decelerate it, and then as you see with the recovery at the bottom, it's then pushing upwards to get it to that standing position. Again, try to keep your hips as far forward as possible and keep the elbows up as high as you can as you're performing that recovery. So here we see the slow-mo version of the barbell clean. Shoulders over the bar, we push the floor away from us, knees move backwards to give the bar space. As the bar passes the knees, we then push the hips forward to get this double knee bend. The bar brushes against the thighs. We initiate a violent jump and shrug, come up onto our toes. Feet will shift slightly laterally to get us into a better cat position. Pull ourselves underneath the bar, catch the bar on the shoulders in the rack position, decelerate it, and then push up into a standing position. And then it's not unusual to then see people start to adjust the grip in preparation for the jerk overhead. So key differences with the clean setup is going to have a narrower grip. Again, lift is going to be slightly higher than we were for the snatch. Transition to second pull, the bar is going to brush slightly lower down the thighs, mid to upper thighs. For the second pull and pull under, bar is going to reach a lower peak height, so you're not going to have to lift it up as high to catch it in a front squat versus an overhead squat position. And as a result, it means more load can be lifted. And then for the catch, we're obviously catching the bar in this front squat position. So we've kind of looked at those with the previous presentation. We'll now have a quick look at the jerk and discuss the jerk phases and the jerk setup. So the jerk grip width may differ from the clean rack position. A lot of people just think it's going to be identically the same. Whatever grip or whatever width grip we were using for our front squat and for our clean, that's what we're going to use for the jerk, and that's not necessarily the case. Although we caught it in this position, many lifters will then adjust their grip, as we kind of saw at the end of that previous video, to a wider position after the completion of the clean in order to make it easier to jerk the bar overhead. This is usually done by lifters bouncing the bar a few times in the rack position in order to allow them to shift their hands slightly outwards to a wider grip, just to facilitate a slightly easier jerk. Again, the wider grip means you don't have to lift the bar quite as high, so it's more biomechanically efficient. Now the phases of the jerk, we'll look at the split jerk to begin with, and then we'll kind of go through the kind of other variations. But the jerk phases consist of 5 phases. They've got the dip, drive, push under, catch, and recovery. So with the dip, what you're going to do is you're going to drop down into a fast partial front squat, and then immediately, without pausing, you're going to drive upwards. You're going to change direction. You want to move your head slightly backwards so you don't project the bar into your chin. And the bar is going to project off the shoulders in a vertical trajectory. So you dip down into a squat, drive straight back up, and it's that force that allows the bar to move upwards. Again, same kind of thing that we did or saw for the snatch and for the clean. Once the bar is moving upwards, then the goal is all about changing the direction of the body. So in this case, once we've done the drive and the bar's moving upwards, then we do a push under, where we're going to push the body downwards as the bar rises. And for the split jerk, we're going to split the feet forwards and backwards to get into, almost like a kind of split squat position. For the catch, we then catch the bar with the arms locked. The lead knee is pretty much over the lead ankle, and the rear foot is on the toes. So this split just allows us to drop our body very quickly, and we drop the body quickly by splitting one foot forwards, the other foot backwards, and actively pushing the body downwards against the bar as it's moving upwards. For the recovery then, to get back to a parallel stance position, you want to push back with the lead leg, and we tend to describe this as you slide the front foot or the lead foot backwards, and you might do that with kind of 1 or 2 slides until that foot is kind of almost under the bar, and then you're going to step forwards with the rear leg. So here we see this with stills. We do that dip, that partial squat, then we drive upwards as the bar kind of moves off the shoulders, and we've kind of completed everything that we need to get the bar move into the height we need. So as you see, we've got extension of the hips, extension of the knees, plantar flexion of the ankles, all the similar kind of traits that we saw with the second pull for the clean and for the snatch. So as the bar's moving upwards, then we push ourselves underneath, and again we adjust our feet for the catch position. So with the split jerk, in this case, foot adjustment just means moving 1 foot forwards and 1 foot backwards. We catch the bar in this overhead split squat position, and as you see from that image in the bottom left hand corner, the lead knee is over the ankle, so that shin is and that lower leg is vertical. Shoulders are under the bar, hips are under the bar, and then that rear foot is behind the bar. We have a slight bend in that rear knee, and we don't want it to be too bent, like we would do with like a reverse lunge or a split squat, because it's actually a little bit unstable. So you want to try to straighten that leg, and that creates tension on the hip flexor and just makes you more stable. Now, how much knee bend and how far you can extend that thigh backwards will kind of depend on your own mobility. For some people it's quite straight, for some others it's quite bent. You just want to make sure you've got tension on the hip flexor, and that's what creates stability. And then we push back with, in this case, if you look at the image, push back with the right leg first of all to bring it under the bar, and then step forward with the left foot until we get into that recovery position to complete. So again, watching a slow-mo image of this. From that rack position, we do a mini squat downwards, try to keep the torso as vertical as possible, try not to lean forward. Dip down, no pause, no hesitation. We then immediately change direction, so we use that fast squat to kind of load all those muscles. Drive upwards, extend the hips, extend the knees, up onto the toes, and then as the bar projects off the shoulders, we split 1 foot forwards and 1 foot backwards. Lock the elbows out, briefly stabilize, and then we move the front foot first, 1 or 2 steps, and then take a step forward. Obviously, when you're in competition lifting heavy loads, it may not be perfect, but that's pretty much the technique that you want to follow. For the power jerk, this is very similar. Obviously in the phases, it's just what catch position we get into. So we're still going to do the dip, drive, push under, catch and recovery. Dip and drive are identical. You drop into a fast partial front squat. For the drive, we then, without pausing, drive straight upwards, moving the head back slightly so the bar projects off the shoulders. Extend at the hips, extend at the knees, come up onto the toes, everything the same as what we've just described. The main difference now is then for the push under. So you're going to push the body downwards as the bar rises, but rather than shifting the feet forwards and backwards, we are just going to shift the feet laterally, just like we do with the parallel stance, clean and snatch, to get into a parallel overhead squat position. So you're going to catch the bar, again with the arms locked, this time in a partial overhead squat and a parallel stance, so feet are kind of together, or at least parallel. For the recovery, just as we did with the snatch, you're then just going to push upwards to a standing position. So it does require a little bit more mobility to get into a slightly kind of narrower grip overhead squat than the split jerk variation. So there's kind of pros and cons, and we'll kind of have a quick discussion of these in a second. So here we see the power jerk. We do that dip down, drive upwards. As the bar projects off the shoulders, we then change direction, push ourselves underneath the bar in preparation for the catch position. The power jerk and the squat jerk are pretty much identical. It's just how high do you push the bar and how low down do you get for the overhead squat. So when it's a partial squat, we call it a power jerk. If you actually drop down lower and get into a full squat position, then we would just refer to that as a squat jerk. So pretty much the same kind of phase, well, exactly the same phases, same biomechanics. It's just how high are you lifting the bar and how low you get in for the overhead squat. So again, here we see this being performed. We do a dip, a drive. As we push ourselves underneath the bar, we shift our feet laterally and we catch the bar in a partial overhead squat position. Push ourselves up to standing, and then we can lower the bar with whatever method is most appropriate. And that's our barbell power jerk. So jerk differences. So for the setup, obviously, as we mentioned, the grip width can be adjusted. That's a bit of individual preference after we've cleaned the weight up. For the drive, the bar's going to reach a lower peak height for the squat jerk, so you don't have to lift it up as high if you're dropping down a lot lower. It'll get to a slightly higher peak height for the split or power jerk. Yeah, kind of marginal differences between those, but it boils down to what you find most comfortable for the catch position as much as anything. So for the catch and recovery, the split jerk, well, that's less stable, so there's going to be more instability, But the plus point is it does require a little less range of motion. A lot of people find it easier to get into a split overhead squat catch position, but we then have to kind of adjust the feet, and so it is more unstable. The power jerk and also the squat jerk are more stable, but they do require more range of motion. And this is where we have that trade-off, and this is where individual lifters will kind of have a play around with both, find which suits them, and then although they may use both within training, they'll probably have a preference when they're actually in competitions. So you want to complete the review questions for this section to ensure you've met the learning outcomes, and then move on to the next module.